Hi everyone, I'm Gillie Stoneham and I'm delighted to be offering the certificate course in Gender-Affirming Voice and Communication for the Voice Study Centre. I'm a cis woman, my pronouns are she, her, and I've been working in gender-affirming voice since 2006. My aim is to come at this course from three angles. Firstly, my knowledge and skills as a voice and communication therapist working in healthcare. Secondly, my experience and expertise coaching voice and communication and personal impact within corporate settings, within health and education. And last but by no means least, my collaboration with people with lived experience. Each of the 6 sessions in this course will focus on different aspects and will also include some experiential work. Taking our practice forward involves just this, practice, and it would not be right to offer a course that was theoretical without encouraging you to be in relationship with your own speaking voice and try out some of the exercises and approaches and find your own style, as well as looking at how you flex your voice and what it currently does and what it might do with some of the exercises. I'm going to share my screen just to give an overview of the sessions. So let me get this up. So the introductory session will consider the importance of grounding voice expertise in cultural sensitivity and humility. So if we're practitioners who identify as cis, then we need to understand a little bit about the culture. And I will have a co-presenter with lived experience who will accompany me for part of the session in exploring just this. How do we consider the wider impact of othering and belonging? How do we, within this context of difference, find ways of connecting and embracing that difference in working collaboratively with someone's unique voice goals? So whether we identify as cis, as trans, as gender questioning, considering that cultural context is really important, so that when we're in the room with somebody, we can own our own assumptions, our own unconscious biases. How do we come to that place and be alongside somebody if we haven't explored our own sense of identity and our own prejudices and where we've come from in terms of cultural norms, social norms. So that's the context within which we're working, and because voice is part of identity, then considering that whole sense of our own identity from our own social context is important. So we look at how gender-affirming voice and communication work sits at the interface of voice therapy, voice teaching, voice coaching, and considering professional boundaries. So as a speech and language therapist, I've worked predominantly in healthcare, and gender-affirming voice work has traditionally been within gender clinics, within voice clinics, has been the speech and language therapist's role. Voice coaches have been part of gender clinics. And of course, because we're working with the majority of people who do not have a voice disorder, then we're working with healthy voices. And so exploring voice in that way, it becomes very different from helping somebody who has a problem with voice get back to normal, healthy voice. And that involves understanding where the people we work with step into that place of risk, because it's completely new. Stepping into the unknown, somebody wants to move their voice to a particular place, wants to develop a more comfortable voice, but may not have any practical experience and experiential sense of what that voice sounds like, feels like. So we're supporting that step into the unknown and risking things not turning out immediately how somebody expected. So we're working with that individual's expectations and how we as voice experts understand those small baby steps towards developing a more flexible, comfortable, efficient, functional voice that we're looking for. For practitioners who are cis, that examining of our own assumptions and unconscious biases equips us better to consider voice as a spectrum along which we can find a comfortable place to express our authentic selves. So we're looking at this spectrum of our most masculine voice to our most feminine voice, rather than this outmoded binary notion that somebody has a voice that is a typical voice for male, female, you know, really just dispersing with those binary measures of voice and considering that spectrum, so that I own my own masculine voice quality, I own my own most feminine voice quality, and that whole spectrum in between. So the experiential bit of the first session will be about looking at being in relationship with our own speaking voices, and that opportunity to reflect on our own vocal journey and the emotional connection that we have with our own dynamic speaking voice. In the second session, I'll be joined by a colleague involved in diagnostic assessments to look at that minefield of medical and legal processes involved. What do we mean by things like gender dysphoria? Who gatekeeps access to hormone therapy and surgery? What services and pathways exist to support transition? And how do we enable people to find gender comfort and this quality of euphoria, trans joy, trans euphoria around people being supported towards expressing the identity that they have internally? So this context helps us in turn to understand where voice might be a larger or smaller part of this gender comfort. Somebody might have no vocal dysphoria. They might have gender dysphoria, but be comfortable with voice. They might have specific vocal dysphoria around voice. I had a client a couple of days ago who was saying that actually, as she now is more comfortable with her appearance and feels that visually she can go out and feel that she expresses who she is, vocal dysphoria has increased because she feels this is the aspect that is mismatched, is not congruent with her other aspects of her identity and gender expression. So we'll begin to explore general principles of gender-affirming voice, not least how we need to build competence and confidence in vocal skills, whilst also offering early support with managing that vocal dysphoria, any vocal dysphoria around voice. How do we help people right from the off to work with that, with those feelings of discomfort, and where they might find some reframing, some ability to perceive positive aspects of their own voices in the early stages. In session 3, we will take a deeper dive into re-examining our approach to some of the vocal parameters like pitch, resonance, voice quality, tone, in particular in functional voice and vocal expression. So that will cover taking a brief look at biofeedback apps where people can visually see what's happening to their vocal patterns. We'll also consider some more creative ways of supporting people psychologically in managing things like imposter syndrome. When somebody steps into a voice that they haven't used before, into voice qualities they haven't used before, sometimes there is this feeling of imposter syndrome. It doesn't feel like me. I can't be using this voice because people will look at me differently. It doesn't sound, normal, authentic. So where those feelings exist, how do we again offer people feedback that is constructive feedback that actually affirms some of the things that we hear somebody doing as a step along the way, even though it might not be where they'll end up, those positive steps towards achieving vocal comfort. And building a toolkit for ourselves includes that confidence to flex our own vocal dynamics away from habitual patterns. So the experiential bit will include our ability to use voice more creatively, demonstrating, modeling, sharing expertise around the nature of changing spoken voice, And that can offer people very important scaffolding if their own voice is a source of discomfort and distress. So how do we scaffold people towards being able to achieve more, being able to feel and hear more flexibility in their own voices and develop that self-efficacy. Session 4. In session 4, we'll explore the need to balance the physical and the psychological. So how do we best support people's goals, create opportunities for success in sustaining new vocal dynamics? So that paradox of behavior change, the more people want that change, sometimes the more challenging it is to accept the work involved and to accept less than perfect. So what is good enough? The challenge of integrating those changes into social communication, particularly. So we'll look at voice groups as a bridge to this integration and extending opportunities for exploring voice in more everyday social situations. In a voice group, we become part of this community. So facilitators and participants build this community in which everyone can explore that broader communication, those dynamics and strategies for navigating complexities that happen when we're interacting with other people. Where do we meet negative perceptions? How do we manage some of the perhaps things that might be our own negative perceptions, might not be the reality, but maybe fears, and we're working with our own assumptions. And in that way, we might look at voice as one of the communication dynamics alongside, for example, nonverbal behavior, increased linguistic complexity and cognitive load, where we're using our brains more for cognitive linguistic tasks, and there's less space for consciously thinking about voice. How do we navigate that? Specific contexts such as using the telephone and other audio, voice, WhatsApp, voice notes, and so on, online gaming where we're using voice to interact with other game players, assertive voice. And giving and receiving affirming peer feedback is part of that group work. We build self-efficacy through that support of the group, and there will be opportunity to explore the relationship between singing voice and speaking voice in later sessions. In session 5, again, I'll be joined by a colleague to look at inclusivity, particularly around neurodiversity. We have many people that we work with who identify as neurodivergent. And so how do we look at accessibility of information, changing the way that we're working? How do we help somebody explore in a different way and practice in a way that fits their learning style? We'll look at other vocal contexts such as projection, and in the experiential work, explore projection and how we might use voice assertively. And finally, in session 6, we will bring it all together. What are the implications for the way we've explored voice in looking also at the singing voice? Experiential work we'll cover, we'll look at public speaking, presentation of self, performance, that performing voice, which I know is specifically covered on one of the other courses in the Voice Study Centre. Where are you now in your own vocal journey, and what are your next steps in gender-affirming voice in terms of learning and broadening your understanding? We'll, of course, look at the reflective assignment. There'll be support for writing your portfolio. So my hope is that the course will unite us in examining gender-affirming voice and extend what you already know and use in your practice. If we have a diverse range of people on the program, identifying not just as cis, maybe gender questioning, maybe as trans, maybe non-binary. That will be a very rich mix of perceptions and perspectives and experience. I hope you'll be inspired to dig deeper into your relationship with your own speaking voice on this course, and I really look forward to welcoming you in January.